The moment I walked into that funeral home, I knew something was wrong. Not the kind of wrong that comes with grief, the heavy, suffocating wrong that fills every room where someone you love is being buried.
No.
This was a different kind of wrong. The kind that crawls up the back of your neck. The kind that makes the air feel thin. People were staring at me. Not the soft, sympathetic stares of people who feel sorry for you. These were sharp, searching, like they were waiting to see what I would do when I found out something I didn't know yet. I'm Maya. I was 29 years old, and I was burying my father. His name was Robert Hale, 61 years old. Quiet man, steady man. The kind of father who showed up to every school play even when he worked a double shift the night before. The kind of man who learned to braid hair from a YouTube tutorial because he didn't want me going to school looking like nobody cared. He raised me alone from the time I was 4 years old, and in 25 years, he never once made me feel like anything less than the most important person in his world. I drove 6 hours to get to that funeral home. I was the one who picked the flowers, white lilies, because he always said roses were too dramatic. I wrote the eulogy myself, by hand, at his kitchen table, the night before. I knew every person in that room, or I thought I did. And then she spoke. A woman near the front of the room. Black dress, rigid posture, expression like she'd already decided how this day was going to go. Her name was Diane, Robert's older sister. A woman I had met exactly twice in my life. A woman who had not once called my father on his birthday in the last 10 years. A woman who, as far as I knew, had barely existed in our lives. She turned to face me, and in a voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, she said, "You have no right to be standing at that casket. You are not his daughter." The room went still. I want you to understand what that moment felt like, because it wasn't just the words. It was the way nobody gasped. It was the way a few people looked down at their shoes, like they'd been waiting for this. Like they already knew something I didn't. And then I noticed what she was holding. A folded document, tight in her hand. She hadn't opened it yet, but the way she was gripping it told me she'd been planning this moment for a long time. I looked across the room to find Gerald, my father's best friend of 30 years, the man who'd been to every Christmas dinner, every birthday, every hard moment in our family's life. I found him, and when our eyes met, he did something that made my blood run cold. He looked away. I didn't know what was in that document. I didn't know what Diane thought she knew. But standing in that funeral home, surrounded by people who suddenly felt like strangers, one thought kept repeating in my mind. What did my father know that he never told me? Diane straightened her shoulders, unfolded the top edge of the document, and spoke again, this time to the entire room. Before anyone eulogizes this man, there's something everyone here needs to know. And that's when my hands started to shake. Let me tell you who my father actually was, because before the story gets darker, you need to understand what was at stake. Robert Hale was not a complicated man. He liked black coffee, baseball, and fixing things that other people had given up on. He worked in facilities management for 23 years, the guy who showed up when the pipes burst, when the heating failed, when everything was falling apart. He was good at it. Not because it paid well, but because he genuinely believed that broken things deserved to be fixed. That's who raised me. I was 4 years old when he adopted me. My birth mother, a woman named Sandra, had walked out and simply never come back. No note. No forwarding address. No explanation that a 4-year-old could understand or that a grown woman could fully forgive. Robert was a family friend, someone who had known Sandra briefly, and when child services got involved, he stepped forward. Not because he was obligated to, not because anyone asked him to, because he wanted to. He told me that story every year on the anniversary of my adoption, what he called our real anniversary. He'd say, "The day you were born, you belong to the world. The day I signed those papers, you belong to me." Every single year. Never missed it. So you can imagine what it felt like to stand in that funeral home and have a woman tell me, in front of everyone who'd ever known him, that I wasn't his. But here's what started to unsettle me. Beyond the humiliation, beyond the grief, it was the room. Because funerals have a specific energy. People are sad. People are quiet. People hold each other. This room had something else layered underneath all of that. A tension that felt pre-existing, like an argument that had been paused, not resolved. And the more I looked around, the more I noticed the fault lines. Gerald, standing near the back, arms crossed, jaw tight. A man I'd known my entire life, suddenly looking like he was calculating something. A couple of my father's older friends, men who'd worked with him for decades, exchanging glances I couldn't read. And Diane, still holding that document, not reading from it yet. Just holding it. Letting the room sit in the discomfort she created. That's when I noticed something else. Her purse, expensive, structured, the kind you carry to a business meeting, was sitting open on the seat beside her. And sticking out of it was a business card. White. Embossed lettering. A lawyer's card. She hadn't come here just to grieve. She hadn't come here to say goodbye to her brother. She had come here with a plan. And whatever that plan was, it had been in motion long before today. Diane finally began reading from the document. It was a letter. Handwritten, she said, by my father, allegedly mailed to her 3 weeks before he died. Her voice was controlled, almost rehearsed, as she read select lines out loud. Lines about the adoption. Lines about things being unresolved. Lines that she clearly believed gave her standing to do what she was about to do. But here's what didn't add up. My adoption was finalized in a courtroom 25 years ago. I had seen the paperwork. I had a copy in a box under my childhood bed. A judge signed it. It was done. Legal. Permanent. So what exactly was Diane claiming was unresolved? The answer to that question was somewhere in this room. I could feel it. And then Diane stopped reading, looked up, and said the sentence that made every hair on my body stand up. The letter isn't the only thing he left. He left something inside that casket. And I think it's time we open it. I want you to think about something for a second. You're standing at your father's funeral. You're already broken. You've barely slept in 4 days. You have a eulogy in your pocket that you wrote with shaking hands at 2 in the morning. And now a woman who didn't even bother to visit him when he was sick, is standing in front of a room full of people and suggesting that his casket should be opened. Not for closure. Not for grief. For leverage. That's the moment I found my voice. I stepped forward, and I said, clearly, calmly, with every ounce of composure I had left, "Don't you dare touch that casket." The room shifted. You could feel it like a current changing direction. Some people straightened. Some people looked away. My friend Nora, sitting in the 3rd row, locked eyes with me and gave me the smallest nod. I'm here. Stay standing. But Diane didn't flinch. That's what scared me most. She had expected this. She had prepared for exactly this reaction, which meant she believed, genuinely believed, that whatever she had, it was enough. And then things escalated in a way I hadn't anticipated. Someone in the room had already called Diane's lawyer. He was on speakerphone within minutes. I stood there listening to a man I had never met explain, in calm legal language, that if the letter Diane possessed was authentic, it could constitute grounds for a probate challenge. That my father's estate, the house, the savings account, the life insurance policy, could be frozen pending investigation. The house I grew up in. The house where my bedroom door still had the height marks my father penciled on the frame every birthday. That house. I felt the floor tilt slightly under me. But what happened next, I didn't see it coming. Nora appeared at my elbow and pulled me 2 steps away from the crowd. Her voice was low and urgent. "Maya, your dad called me. About 2 months ago. He asked me if you'd been looking into your birth mother." I stared at her. "Why would he ask you that?" She shook her head. "I don't know. But he sounded worried. Not about you, for you. Like he was trying to get ahead of something." I turned and walked straight to Gerald. He saw me coming, and for a moment I thought he was going to walk away. But he didn't. He stood his ground, and when I stopped in front of him and said, "Tell me what you know, Gerald, right now," something in him gave way. He exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for months. Sandra had come back. My birth mother, the woman who walked away when I was 4 years old and disappeared entirely, had resurfaced 6 months ago. She had contacted my father directly, and the story she brought with her was designed to detonate everything. Sandra claimed that when she signed the adoption relinquishment papers 25 years ago, she had been coerced, that she hadn't fully understood what she was signing, that the process had been rushed and improperly witnessed. She was alleging, with the help of her own attorney, that the adoption had a procedural flaw significant enough to challenge. My father hadn't told me. He hadn't wanted to scare me. Instead, he had quietly hired a private attorney and spent the last 6 months building a case, not against me, not against anyone, but for me, protecting me from a threat I didn't even know existed. And that's when I remembered the voicemail. 3 weeks ago, my father had called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a work meeting. I let it go to voicemail, told myself I'd call him back that evening. Then dinner happened, then exhaustion, then tomorrow again, and I never called back. I never listened to the message. It was still sitting there, unplayed.
Right now.
In my pocket. I couldn't listen to it.
Not yet.
Not in this room, not in front of these people, not while I was still trying to hold myself together. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. What had he called to say? Had he been trying to warn me? Had he finally decided to tell me everything? Or had he simply called to hear my voice, the way he sometimes did on unremarkable Tuesdays, not knowing it would be one of the last times he could? I pressed my hand flat against my pocket, just to feel the phone,
just to know it was there.
And then the funeral director reappeared. He walked toward me quietly, with the careful energy of someone delivering news they weren't sure how to frame. He checked the paperwork in his folder, looked up and said, "Ms. Hale, your father left specific instructions regarding the envelope inside the casket. He designated someone to open it."
He paused.
"He designated you. Only you." Across the room, I heard Diane exhale sharply, a short, punctured sound, like something she'd been holding had just been taken from her. I looked at her face. For the first time since she'd walked in, she looked uncertain. I turned toward the casket, and I walked forward. Have you ever had a moment where time seems to slow down, not dramatically, not like the movies, but quietly? Where every step you take feels weighted, like the air itself has thickened around you. That's what it felt like walking toward that casket. The room was completely silent. Not the polite silence of people being respectful. The held-breath silence of people watching something they know they will remember for the rest of their lives. 40-something people, and the only sound was the soft press of my heels against the carpet. I was almost there when I felt a hand close around my arm.
"Diane."
"I don't think you should be doing this alone," she said. Her voice had shifted, less commanding now, more careful. She could feel it slipping away from her. Whatever she had come here to accomplish, she was watching it move out of reach, and she didn't know how to stop it. Gerald stepped forward before I could respond. He placed himself between Diane and me, quietly, without drama, the way a man does when he has made a decision he's completely at peace with. "She was designated," he said simply. "Step back, Diane."
She did, slowly.
And I kept walking. When I reached the casket, I rested my hands on the edge for just a moment. My father's face was peaceful in a way that living faces rarely are. All the worry gone. All the weight he carried just released. I had avoided looking directly at him since I arrived. It was easier to fight when I wasn't looking at him. But now I looked, and I said, without sound, just the shape of the words, "I've got it, Dad." The funeral director handed me a small letter opener and indicated the inner lining near my father's right side. Tucked there, sealed in a cream-colored envelope, was exactly what he had described. My name was written on the front in my father's handwriting, that particular handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and little notes left on the kitchen counter my whole life. My hands were shaking.
"I want to be honest about that."
They were shaking badly. I broke the seal. Inside was a thick fold of documents, notarized, structured, formal, and on top of them, a handwritten letter. Multi-page.
Dense.
The kind of letter a man writes when he knows he won't get another chance to speak. It was addressed, I realized, not just to me but to the room. He had known. He had known that this moment might happen, that Diane might show up, that someone might try to use his death as a doorway to take something from me. And so he had planned for it. He had sat down, sick, tired, running out of time, and he had written a letter designed to be read aloud in exactly this situation. I looked up at the room. Every face was watching me. I began to read. My father's letter was clear, methodical, and devastating in the best possible way. He confirmed that Sandra had contacted him. He confirmed that he had taken her allegations seriously enough to hire an attorney and conduct a full investigation. The investigation had retrieved the original relinquishment documents from the courthouse archives. Every signature had been verified. Every witness had been accounted for. Sandra's claim of coercion had been reviewed and found to have no legal merit. The documents were valid, properly executed, and unimpeachable. Sandra's case was not just weak. It was over. But my father hadn't stopped there. Attached behind the letter was a document I didn't recognize at first. Formal, dense with legal language, bearing the signatures of 2 attorneys and a notary's stamp dated 8 weeks ago. Gerald, standing at the back of the room, gave a single slow nod when I held it up. He had been there. He had watched my father sign it. It was a deed of formal acknowledgement, a legal document in which Robert Hale explicitly and irrevocably named Maya Rose Hale as his sole heir and rightful daughter, constructed specifically to withstand any posthumous challenge. He hadn't just defended me.
He had armored me.
I heard someone in the room start to cry. I don't know who. I couldn't look up yet, because I had reached the final paragraph of the letter, and my father's handwriting, which had been steady and deliberate throughout, had changed here. Looser. More urgent. Like he had written this part last and quickly because he was tired and running low on time, but needed to say it anyway. He wrote, "If Diane is reading this over Maya's shoulder, I want her to hear this clearly. You lost. And if Maya is reading this alone, I want her to hear this just as clearly. You were never in any danger. I made sure of it. I have always made sure of it. That is the one promise I made the day I brought you home, and I have never broken it." I stopped reading. I couldn't go further. Not in front of everyone. Not yet. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it against my chest, and looked up at the room. Diane was standing very still near the back. Her lawyer's business card was still in her purse. Her document, the letter she had driven across the country to weaponize, was folded on the seat beside her, suddenly meaningless. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt something quieter and more permanent than anger. I felt settled. I turned to face the room. All of them, the ones who had nodded along with Diane, the ones who had looked at their shoes, the ones who had exchanged glances I couldn't read when I first walked in, and I said, "My father left me everything I need, and now I need all of you to let me say goodbye to him." Nobody argued. I reached into my pocket, found my phone, found the voicemail, the one from 3 weeks ago, the Tuesday call I had let go to voicemail and never returned. My thumb hovered over the play button, and I pressed it. His voice came through the speaker, and it filled the room like something that had always belonged there. My father's voice filled that funeral home like sunlight through a window you forgot was there. Not dramatic, not grand, just him. That particular warmth that I had heard every day of my life and had somehow, stupidly, let myself believe I would always have more time with. The voicemail was 3 minutes and 42 seconds long. I know because I have listened to it every single day since. He started simply, "Hey, Bug. It's Dad. I know you're probably in a meeting. You're always in a meeting on Tuesdays." A small laugh moved through the room. Because that was Robert Hale. Even in a message he knew might matter, he led with gentleness. He led with knowing me. Then his voice shifted. Still calm. Still steady. But with the particular weight of a man who has decided to stop carrying something alone. He told me about Sandra. He told me she had resurfaced, that she had made her claims, that he had taken every step necessary to make sure those claims went nowhere. He told me about the attorney, the documents, the deed of acknowledgement. He walked me through all of it, not frantically, not apologetically, but the way he used to explain things when I was small and scared. Methodically. Clearly. Here is what happened. Here is what I did. Here is why you are safe. And then he said, "I didn't tell you, because I didn't want you to spend a single day feeling uncertain about who you are. You are my daughter, Maya. Not because a judge said so, though he did. Not because Sandra failed to stop it, though she did. but because I chose you. Every single day for 25 years, I chose you. And I need you to know that before anything else. By this point, there wasn't a dry eye in that room. Not one. Even the people who had stood on Diane's side of the room when this all began, even they had gone quiet and still in the particular way people do when they realize they almost participated in something they should be ashamed of. Diane herself had not moved. She was standing near the back wall, arms at her sides, her expensive purse with the lawyer's card still hanging from her shoulder. She looked smaller than she had an hour ago. Not defeated exactly, just reduced. Like the room had accurately measured her, and the measurement wasn't flattering. The voicemail continued. "There's a letter in with me," my father said, and yes, he said it exactly like that, casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world to reference your own casket. "Gerald knows about it. The attorneys know about it. Everything is taken care of. I know that might sound like I was planning for the worst, but really, I was just planning for you. That's all I've ever done." A pause. The kind that feels intentional. "Listen, I know you're going to be okay. I know it because I know you. But I also know the next few months are going to be hard, and I need you to let people help you. Let Nora help you. Let Gerald help you. Don't do the thing you always do, where you decide you're fine, when you're not fine." I laughed. Out loud. In the middle of that funeral home. A real laugh, broken and wet and completely unplanned. Because he knew me. Even from a voicemail recorded 3 weeks before he died, he knew exactly what I would try to do. And then, at the very end, his voice softened to something almost private. Something that felt like it was meant only for me, even though the whole room was hearing it. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Bug. Not the adoption you, the person you turned out to be. I used to worry when you were little whether I was doing it right, whether I was enough. But then you'd do something, say something, or just look at me a certain way, and I'd think, yeah, we're okay. We're more than okay." Another pause. "I love you. Don't forget to water the plant on the kitchen windowsill. You always forget the plant." The recording ended. And that was it. That was my father. 43 seconds of practical love at the end of the most important message he ever left me, because that was who he was.
Right up until the end. Steady.
Present. A little bit funny. Completely, permanently mine. The weeks that followed were not easy. I want to be honest about that because real life doesn't resolve cleanly just because a moment does. Diane's probate challenge was formally reviewed and dismissed within 30 days. Robert's attorney sent the findings to her lawyer in a letter that required no follow-up. She did not attend the burial. She has not been in contact since. I don't know what she went home to, and I have decided that is not my problem to carry. Sandra, my birth mother, the woman who surfaced after 25 years to try to unravel something she had voluntarily walked away from, received a formal legal response from my father's estate attorney 2 weeks after the funeral. She did not reply. I don't expect she will. I think she had calculated that Robert's death left a gap she could step into, and she found the gap already filled. Completely. Permanently. Gerald came to the house 3 days after the funeral with a casserole dish and a second envelope, the one my father had asked him to deliver privately, separate from everything that had happened in that room. I sat at the kitchen table and read it alone while Gerald pretended to be very interested in reorganizing the spice cabinet. It was 4 pages long. It was the most personal thing my father ever wrote to me, and I am not going to share what it said, because some things belong only to the people they were meant for. What I will tell you is that I folded it carefully when I was done, put it back in the envelope, and held it against my chest for a long time. Then I walked to the windowsill and watered the plant. 3 weeks after the funeral, the estate was settled without contest. The house became mine, officially, legally, completely. I stood in the kitchen the morning the paperwork was finalized and looked at the room where I had eaten breakfast every day for 15 years, where my father had stood at the stove making coffee at 6 in the morning, where we had argued about curfews and celebrated good grades, and sat in silence together during hard times because sometimes silence with the right person is the most comforting thing in the world. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like being given back something that was always mine, after someone tried very hard to convince me it wasn't. On the kitchen windowsill, next to the plant, I had placed the photograph that was inside the small sealed envelope from the casket, the one my father had marked for Maya after you've read the letter. It was a photograph I had never seen before. Me at 4 years old, on the day he brought me home. I am wearing a yellow coat with the buttons done up wrong, and I am holding his hand with both of mine, and I am looking up at him with an expression that 4-year-olds have before they learn to be guarded, completely open, completely trusting, completely certain that this person is safe. And my father, 36 years old, young in a way I had never seen him because I had never known him young, is not looking at the camera. He is looking down at me, and the expression on his face is not the careful, composed look of a man doing a good thing. It is the involuntary, unguarded expression of a man who has just understood, in real time, what his life is actually for. On the back, in his handwriting, "This was the best day of my life.
Dad."
I set it back against the windowsill where the light caught it best. I didn't feel like an orphan. I didn't feel like someone who had survived something. I felt like what I had always been, what I had always been, what I would always be, regardless of documents or challenges or women with lawyers' business cards and old letters. I felt like his daughter.
Completely.
Permanently. Undeniably. And nothing, not a courtroom, not a casket, not a single person in that room, could have ever changed that.